She's the darling of the Conservative Party, who's forever being touted as a future UK leader. But Ruth Davidson has repeatedly denied that she wants the job, insisting that her political priority is the continued revival of the Scottish Tories and the winning of the 2021 Holyrood election. This evening, she set out some of her political priorities in a lecture at Glasgow University. Ahead of that, she sat down with STV's political editor, Bernard Ponsonby.
Ruth Davidson, this speech here at the University of Glasgow in part is a celebration about what migrants can do for the economy. So is now the time for you to say to the UK government, once and for all, abandon this target of cutting net migration to the tens of thousands?
Well, that's one of the elements of the speech that I'm giving tonight. I've said before, and I'm saying it very plainly, that a target that was set 9 years ago now, when unemployment was running at more than 8%, needs to be revisited when we've got near full employment. We're now at less than 5%. It's also a target that we've never hit in any of those 9 years. And what I'm also saying, because this is a university and because this is another thing that I believe passionately about, is let's take students out of those numbers. Even the members of the public, even people who have concerns, legitimate concerns about immigration that deserve to be discussed and discussed in a mature manner, don't see students as part of that overall immigration figure. So let's take them out.
Do you believe that a one-size-fits-all immigration policy, if the government continue with it, could act as a potential brake on economic growth in Scotland?
Well, what we see is we're already not getting our share, if you like, in Scotland. Now, I think that there's a link between the fact that we have the highest taxes in any part of the UK, and we only get 5.5% of overseas migrants to the UK come to Scotland, where Scotland has a third of the landmass and 8.3% of the population.
How do you fix that?
Well, first of all, what I'd like to see is greater economic growth. So people, when they come to the UK, say, right, which part of the UK is charging ahead? Where's the best possible life for me and my family? I want that to be Scotland. Now, at the moment, we've got growth rates that are less than half of the rest of the UK. The own figures that are put forward by the Scottish Government say that economic growth will be less than 1% per year for the next 4 years. That's the lowest growth rate since the Second World War. So I think we do need an economic stimulus, which is not about having us as the highest tax part of the UK.
I absolutely get that point, but what changes do you have to make to the existing immigration system, the existing visa system now, that would actually help grow the Scottish economy?
Well, one of the things that I'm talking about tonight in the speech is allowing people who are students and have come here, not only take them out of the numbers while they're students, but also have more routes for them staying longer after they've graduated.
What's the break just now to keeping them?
Well, there is already a visa system in place where there are applications that you can do, but when it comes to people working after they've graduated, there are restrictions that are in place. Now, I think that those should be reviewed, and I think they should be reviewed on a UK-wide basis.
What specific restrictions?
Well, we already see that there's no restrictions on the number of students at all, but when you graduate, depending on whether you want a Tier 2 visa or any of these other things, you know, there are limits to how many people are allowed to stay.
So which ones need to be changed in order that the message which you have in this speech was that migration is a good thing, can benefit the Scottish economy, can help grow the Scottish economy? You've already alluded to different tiers of visas for people who are graduates. And my question is, what rule has to change now to change the situation?
Well, what I'm saying is we've already got a scheme in place to look at this. So there's a pilot project going on. It started off only in 4 universities in England. I was a bit upset that there was nothing north of the Watford Gap in there. It now includes other universities, including, I believe, the University of Glasgow. I'll wait for the data to come back on that, but hopefully it will point to the fact that people that we've invested in higher education, we've invested in their academic qualifications and rigour, have got an ability to contribute to the common good and shouldn't be asked then to leave once they've graduated.
What role should the Scottish Parliament have in this?
Well, I think what's important, and I think that there is a good role the Scottish Parliament could play, and I've been talking about this for a while, but let's make us that dynamic part of the UK that actually attracts more of the overseas people that come.
What formal role should the Scottish Parliament have, given that the immigration system at the moment is a one-size-fits-all system which has been driven by targets which the Scottish Parliament has no say over whatsoever?
Well, at the moment in Scotland, you have areas that are legislated over by Holyrood, you have areas that are legislated over by the UK government, you've got areas in between. Now, we've had several updates to the Scotland Act of what powers the Scottish Parliament should have. They were unanimously passed, the Calman Commission report, the Smith Commission report. They all agreed that immigration should stay UK-wide for practical purposes as much as anything else. So in terms of where primarily this has to change, it has to be at a UK government level. And that's one of the reasons why I'm talking so strongly to my UK government colleagues tonight.
OK, let's move on to health and quote directly from the speech, because you're talking in this speech about the challenges that the National Health Service will have, and they were underlined only last week when the IFS was saying that there is always a sense in which politicians are behind the curve in identifying the amount of resources that the NHS requires. You say, and I quote, the UK government has a choice to make, and if that choice is between extra spending on the NHS or introducing further tax breaks beyond those already promised, I choose the NHS.
Yes.
Why?
Well, because we are at that crunch point, and it's not just the IFS that has identified it. There are other areas that have too, because of the ageing demographic, because of changes in social care and combining with NHS budgets. These are issues affecting not just the UK, but the whole of Western democracy, really. We need to make a decision about, do we want above inflation input into the NHS? I think we do. We've also seen, from people across the UK, we've seen an acknowledgement that if they are asked to put in extra money, and if they can see that money goes directly to hospitals and GP surgeries, it doesn't go into some general pot of taxation, then they are willing to look at that. But they've got to see the link. And I think that's important, because if we change this UK-wide, this will have huge knock-on effects for Scotland.
Absolutely.
And my issue is the UK government, so since the Tories came to power in 2010, the extra investment into health, it's gone up by 11% health spending in England. In Scotland, it's only gone up by 5.4%, less than half. So we need to make sure that if this does happen, and I'm urging my colleagues to do it, that every penny that comes from this policy to Scotland goes straight into the NHS.
But again, given that you've absolutely crystallised the issue here, this is precisely what the Institute for Fiscal Studies were crystallising last week as well. Your judgment is, if it's the NHS or further tax cuts, you're with the NHS. But surely there is an inexorable logic that if the National Health Service comes back and says, we still need yet more resources, what prevents you from saying, you know what, I'm going to be a Conservative politician who's going to go out and argue for higher taxes for the NHS if that's what it requires?
We know that we've lowered the tax burden on people right across the country, and I think it was right to do so. So it used to be you only got your first sort of £5,500 of your earnings before you started paying tax. We've taken thousands of people out of tax altogether. We've reduced taxes for thousands more. And we said that we would take that to the £12,500 level.
Understood, but that wasn't my question. Why can't you as a Conservative leader say, this is what we've done in terms of the tax cutting agenda, because we understand the pressure that families were under, but I don't want any more tax cuts if the choice is between lower taxes and money for the National Health Service. My question to you is quite simple. Why can't you be a Conservative leader that goes a little further, that if the judgment is that the National Health Service needs more resources, you'll be prepared to argue for tax increases?
Well, the question at the moment, and the question that's being discussed at government and has begun to come into the public realm, and this is why I'm putting my view on show in this platform that I've got tonight, is whether this should happen at all, this extra above inflation investment for the long term.
You wouldn't say no to higher taxes for the NHS,
Prime Minister,
would you?
Let me finish and I'll explain all of this, Bernard. And the Prime Minister has said, and this is quite important.
I know, because you're going to explain it in a way not to answer it.
No, I'm not. And what I'm going to say is...
You could actually countenance higher taxes for the NHS.
Let me get the answer out, and we'll all have a listen. So the Prime Minister said she wants 10 years of investment. Now, this has never happened in the UK before. The NHS has never known what it's going to have 10 years from now. This is a really important shift and change. Now, if the decision is made to have these above inflation inputs, even above what's already gone in, there are different ways to pay for that. So my point today is, let's have it. I'm being absolutely clear about that. And then let's see the sums in the different ways. So that could be through general taxation, but I think that the public wouldn't trust the government on that, any government on that, which is why we've seen they want to see the link from their own pocket to the hospitals. You could raise national insurance and ring fence it. You could increase borrowing to fund services. Now, let's see what the Treasury comes back with in terms of the sums. So I'm not going to opine today the method. What I'm saying is, let's have that outcome.
Let me move on to Brexit, because Michel Barnier has made the point time and again that in order to prevent a hard border in Ireland, he believes there needs to be a bespoke solution. Can you be clear that if there is a bespoke solution for Northern Ireland, that solution should be available for Scotland as well?
What I've said, and I said it really clearly before Christmas when this really first came to light, is I've got two principles on this. One, there should not be a hard border in Northern Ireland. We need to have the flow of goods and people and services. And two, we can't have one part of the United Kingdom being left behind, like Northern Ireland, so a different deal for them than the rest of the UK. We can't have a border in the Irish Sea. It's not in Scotland's interest. I don't believe it's in Northern Ireland's interests or the rest of the UK's either. So whatever the deal is for Northern Ireland, it has to be for the whole of the UK. And I went further to say that even if that means closer regulatory alignment with the EU, then so be it. We should be comfortable with that because Britain helped write most of those regulations.
And the Prime Minister understands that if she signs up to
she knows my position.
A bespoke solution for Northern Ireland and it ain't available for Scotland, you'll be the first to criticise her.
Well, she knows that I'm always robust and speak my mind, yes.
OK, let me ask you finally, you haven't changed your name, have you?
No, I haven't. Why?
No, it's just that I was reading The Scotsman and The Guardian and The Sun, and there was a picture of you with the word Messiah next to it. And
right.
apparently, Michael Gove is about to take over, but only interim as leader of the Conservative Party, because you're going to be the UK Conservative Party leader after him. Where is all this coming from?
I have absolutely no idea, but last week it was Jacob Rees-Mogg. The week before it was Boris Johnson. I think there's a whole industry that goes on at Westminster of journalists writing fairy stories. I know who the Prime Minister is. It's Theresa May. She's got my support and she's got some really big Brexit negotiations next month and I'll stand right behind her.
Could you ever see yourself in the House of Commons?
I'm not sure I can. I really don't.
Never?
I don't know, but I don't think so, and I certainly don't see myself as Prime Minister.
But you should never say never.
Right, OK, I'll take that under advice from you, Bernard.
So you might.
I don't know what you're trying to get me to say, but I know what my job is. My job is to lead the Scottish Conservative Party. I want to be the First Minister of Scotland, and that's what I'm working towards.
And that's what you'll be doing in 2021?
I hope so.
Ruth Davidson, thank you very much indeed for joining us in Scotland tonight.